Hi, welcome back to Modern Grunt Survival. This video is going to be taking part in a few different environmental conditions, so you can get a full picture of exactly how to complete the task. Today, on Modern Grunt Survival, we're going to be covering fire building, specifically building a fire from scratch and with minimal resources, and what the three most common resources are for starting a fire. As you can see behind me, we're in a fairly damp environment, but it's not currently raining. But the ground beneath me is pretty damp, which does make it pretty challenging. Also, we're going to cover some safety precautions to have on hand, because the last thing we want to do is set all of Mother Nature on fire. We just want to have a controlled fire for cooking, signal, or other survival purposes that we'll cover later on in the show. So right now we're going to cover the three types of, in this case, wood or burning material that you're going to need to gather, and ideally a fourth type that will really help you if you're trying to survive in the wild. So down here we have some good examples of the three types of wood that we're going to gather. The little tiny stuff, which I will show you how to arrange later on in this video, this is going to be your tinder. Not that kind of tinder. This tinder is basically the ground foundation of a fire building. If you don't have this positioned well or enough of it to get a good flame going, this could make or break your fire. So get as much of this stuff as you can. And you notice this one is pretty dry. It was kept under a tarp during the rain, but it is damp because of the humidity around, and some water does tend to splash around when you're outside. So keep that in mind. What you don't want to start a fire with is wood like this that's effectively been soaked. Now, you can see inside there is still pretty dry, but you have to work through that soaked layer of wood. You want to add this on when you have the fire already going. What you don't want to do is put that to start. So what you do want to do, sometimes you have wood like this where it's partially wet. You can still start it with this dry section of wood and then just move it along. And once the fire gets hot, this is going to be called your kindling. This is your middle of the ground, keeping and making some hot coals to keep your fire going as long as you need to. Last but not least, and the most important, that will save you a bunch of time, is fuel. This is the big chunks of wood that are going to keep your fire going for a really long time and keep it really hot. Also make it even hotter if you need to do that. This would be what I would say probably the smaller side of fuel. So anything but like this or bigger would be considered fuel. You want to also gather as much of this as you can. Ideally you want to gather as much as everything as you can, but what I have right here is sufficient to get enough of a fire going to where the stuff that is wet that I want to cut up will get dried out and I can get some decent flame on it. So now that we know the three different types of wood that we want to start with, let's talk about that fourth different type of burning material that's going to come in real handy. Now, before we get into actually setting this fire, I want to talk about that fourth type of material that we're going to want to burn, and that's going to be a fire starter. Specifically, we have this one from Blackbeard that I'm going to feature today just as an example. Again, not necessarily endorsement or sponsorship or anything like that, but these guys are pretty cool. So these are little fire plugs you can get from them, and the idea is you stretch these out and they give you a pretty good burn. So we're going to try this out as well, but the first I'm going to show you how to start a fire using those original three, and then you're going to see where this thing comes in really handy. Fire requires three things. oxygen or air, fuel, and heat. Okay, so you're going to have to start a fire with some source of heat. So you're going to need one of three things. The most common is a lighter. Specifically, what I recommend for starting a fire is a torch lighter, butane torch lighter. And let me tell you, this will do a lot of the work for you. But this could go dead, could run out of fuel, or you could just lose it. So the second most common way to start a fire, and arguably the most difficult, is with matches. Specifically, what I would recommend are storm-proof matches. These are great because they put off a very large flame and spark for a pretty decent amount of time. So for starting wet conditions, these are ideal. Highly recommend them. If you're a true grunt, however, you should be able to start with MRE matches. Not the easiest, but it's doable. And then last but not least, and my personal favorite, is going to be not in this pocket, I believe. It is actually in this pocket. There we go. Aha. There we are. Also a feature from Blackbeard. Again, not necessary that you get it from them. These are actually easily found anywhere online. You just want a big old ferro rod if you can get it. All right. This is again a ferro rod. I'll make sure I'll spell it out for you. And basically what it is a giant magnesium rod. It's got a little coating on it. You notice that this one isn't actually mine. Mine was lost. I have two more on the way, but Buddy was fortunate enough to allow me to use his for today. You see this has already been scraped away, and it's exactly what you want. You want it prepped like this, so when you need that spark, you can get a lot of it. And just to give you an example, how you would spark this. Now you see a lot of them actually come tethered like this with the tool. I personally don't recommend this because it doesn't allow you to get enough leverage on this ferro rod, or at least enough leverage to really get a good spark. Now there is a nice little ledge here, so you can get a little something going, but it's minimal at best. All right, so that looks impressive right now, but it's really not putting out a lot of spark. What you really want to do is, personally, I use a old Gerber tool, and what I actually use is the blade on it. You might think this is crazy, but I've used it a couple times. The blade is hard enough to where it actually takes a pretty decent beating. You can see with the blade, though, much bigger spark I'm getting out of that. And by the way, this is thousands of degrees in Fahrenheit, so if you can continuously get a spark out of this, it's much easier to start a fire actually with this tool than even this guy sometimes, because you're getting consistent heat and it's not depending on fuel or a certain angle application. You can just go to town on these things, which I will demonstrate later. But for now, those are the main tools that you're going to use to start a fire with. There are a ton of different fire starters out there. There are natural fire starters as well. Okay, leaves that aren't wet like this are great. For example, if I can find one, I think there might be some dry areas around still. Here you could see this one's got a little bit of more of a snap to it. I could still use this, and just for show of measure, I believe I turned off the butane there. A little bit more. You can see that that one still puts out flame. So natural fire starters can also work as well. You don't have to go out and buy nice ones, though there are nice ones. There is one we'll feature in a future video from Blackbeard that is a waxed rope that's really handy for storm conditions. We'll probably feature that in a backpacking video, as you'll see just how easy it is to get a fire going with that. So without further ado, let's talk about some safety considerations before we even go to start a fire, and what we need to do before we just start, putting heat on things and trying to get things to go up in flame. Think about how you're going to be able to put that fire out. Make sure you have enough water on hand to put that small little cooking fire out. All right. Now, the bigger the fire you're going to build, the more water you're going to need to have on hand to be able to put it out. Another thing you may want to consider having is some way of moving dirt, and quickly, because dirt can also be used to put out a fire if you're in that type of condition, like we are here. Something like a folding shovel or the old e-tool can be pretty handy at that task, and can also be a secondary measure if water just isn't cutting. So first thing to think about, how are you going to put out the fire you're about to start? The second thing you're going to think about is, what area do you want to set up in? Make sure it's clear of trees and branches, that you're not getting some sort of crazy, overhang over your fire right as you're starting to build it. So make sure that your ground area is clear, free of any leaves. Okay, so leaves like we have down here, we want to make sure we clear and kick away. Make sure the area is nice and clear and clean before we even consider starting this fire. So make sure we have the water ready, we have the area cleared out, all our tools ready. Once we have that ready, then we can start gathering the materials that we need to start the fire. If you have a team of people or another buddy with you, or a significant other, for example, then you can split those tasks. One person can maybe gather the burning material while the other person preps the fire pit, so on and so forth. So you can split it up however you see fit. But obviously, you can see the more people you have involved, the more efficient the process, and the better and safer it should be. So make sure that, again, you do have the way to put it out based on the fire size that you're planning on building. All right, before we build this fire, we're going to need to gather some materials. So here's a couple things to consider when you are looking around the area for, wood to burn. So one thing, try to stay away from rotten wood. Any wood that's got mold, moss, stay away from that stuff, right? Again, to build it, all right? Later on, if you need to just keep heat going and running out of wood around the area, do what you got to do. But to start it, you're going to be very close to it. You don't want to be breathing any nasty stuff while you're starting a fire, especially if you're in a survival type situation. So find some decent wood. Have some good tools that will help you manage that wood. So one tool that I like personally is the SOG camp saw. Again, not sponsored or endorsing it, but these guys are great. So if we can have a link to it later on, we will, just so you have a direct link to this guy. I got this for less than $20, and it is a champ. So one thing you do want to consider, especially if you collect something like that, the type of large branch structure, you're going to need something like this to cut it up with minimal energy. Energy is another thing you really want to consider when you're out in the woods. So don't be burning up energy trying to kick and stomp through things, and definitely don't try to set an entire tree on fire hoping that you can part it out some way. It's not a good idea, nor is it safe. So make sure you have a way to cut up some wood. If you can't cut up the big stuff, stick to tinder and kindling that you can cut up, and just focus on feeding that fire as you need it. If it's just a small cooking fire, that's all you should need anyway. Fuel is really more for keeping the fire going. So if you need it for heat, however, you're going to have to find a way to get fuel in there. And again, if you don't have a tool like this, you're going to be hard pressed to get it done correctly. Also, try to pick, if you are going to get tinder and kindling, try to pick stuff that's on top, right? Sitting on top of the soil. It's most likely to be dry. It's not soaking in underneath with the leaves and all that stuff. So don't go digging for the little stuff. So try to pick from the top as much as you can. Also, what you will never do is cut an actual tree down unless you are in an emergency survival situation and you need that heat Then if you need to, I still don't recommend it. There should be enough dead wood laying around for you to burn naturally. So if there is some odd situation and you have to take down a live tree, again, I don't recommend it, but you got to survive somehow. So if it comes down to it, I guess. Uh, I don't see that being a thing, but you never know what environment you might end up in, what situation you might end up in. So just keep that in mind. Try to get the dead stuff off the ground first before you even consider taking down live trees. Trees are very beneficial, not just for the oxygen they put out. They provide great shade and cover from the weather and elements. And if you're like me and like setting up hammocks, they're great for that too. So I would rather not take down a live tree if I want it. So let's get into actually building this fire. Yeah. All right. So we got all our fire tools ready. Everything's ready here. We got our safety equipment just in case things get out of hand. This little area is where we're going to be building, again, a small cooking fire. If you can get a small cooking fire going, getting a big fire is a breeze. So what we're going to consider is fire poker. In this case, I'm just going to use either this entrenchment tool or the saw. So I'm going to keep these guys together. And if I need to poke around, right, I would normally recommend leather gloves as well, but not everyone's going to have these. So I am going to do these barehanded just to show that it can be done the safe way to do that, actually. Not a lot of people talk about how to do things without the proper equipment. Not everyone may have it. Now for size reference, I've arranged the wood and burning material that we're going to use today. Notice I keep saying burning material because you might be in an environment where wood may not be an option. You might need to find other things to burn. Specifically if you're in like an abandoned urban setting or something like that. So usually it is going to be wood, but you never know, right? So we're going to start out with the tinder, and I'm going to remove this guy because it's a little wet. Not feeling it right now. And I'm just going to take this and I'm going to just fold it in half like a piece of paper. You can hear that crunching. That's a good sign that you have good tinder. If you don't hear crunching like that, you may want to, look for better tinder. If this is the best stuff you can find and it's not cracking, hey, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. So I get that too. All right, you're going to fold it twice if you can into about a 6-inch length bundle of twigs, essentially, is what we're talking about. So twigs are what you would count as tinder. You want to tightly bound as much as you can, and a pretty good amount. You can see if I set this on fire, how it would produce a good amount of flame. Now, we did say small cooking fire, so we're going to eliminate the fuel from the situation, but we are going to use tinder and kindling. So kindling here is going to be our main driver of heat for our cooking fire. Now, we're not going to actually cook with this fire, but you will see how it can obviously be used. In a later video, we will show an actual backpacking cooking fire in use and what that looks like in both the kind of hasty prepared fire pit and an actual like camp stove, which you can get yourself. But if you can't afford the camp stove, old school never hurts. All right, just again, make sure you're clear of anything that you don't want to burn, so you don't get a runaway fire. With the ground being wet, it is a safer condition, so you don't have to worry about it as much. These being a little large, I'm going to break them up. Now I'm just going to position them like so, okay, because I want to get a little bit of a teepee type of fire. Now normally when I'm doing a big fire, I don't go for this type of configuration, but if I'm going for a cooking fire, I want this fire to collapse in on itself and make me a nice little bed of coals that I can use to put my little camp pot on. Or if I have a little grill, then I can get 2 pieces of fuel on either side, set my grill on top, do it up that way. It just depends on the gear that you're running, but the foundation of the fire is still the same. So I want to take just a few pieces of kindling, enough to where I know that that's going to create a good heat source, okay? Then maybe even top it off with a couple more little dry pieces of tinder, just a tiny little bit up here to drive some of that heat to the top. Okay. Now, I did say ferro rods are the best for this, so I would say we should start with that, correct? So let's see. And hopefully, if we can get some rain to come out this way, usually asking for rain, but in this case, it wouldn't hurt. I'm going to place the ferro rod about there, and then I'm just going to drive as much spark as I can against this wood. All right, got a lot of spark and not a lot of wood going off. So in this situation is when I would move to a fire starter, like the Blackbeard stuff I was telling you about. So let's see how these two work together. Now these, I want to make sure that these are nice and stretched out. I'm just rolling it out so that it kind of thins out for me. All right. Okay, now I got it fairly stretched out for this size fire. I'm happy with it. I want to put it back over here and see if I can get that ferro rod to spark up this fire starter and get this fire going. Yeah. Again, ferro rod, it's an acquired thing. This looks pretty bad, but wipes right off. Okay, it's more bark than it is bite. All right, so give this a whirl. I'm going to try and position this ferro rod so that it's making contact with the fire starter, and I'm actually lighting it. Whew. No luck with this one. We'll try the ferro rod at a different time, under different conditions with a different fire starter. I have a feeling this will work a lot better with a match. All right, so we got storms approaching. This is actually quite appropriate at this time. This kind of collapsed. Didn't work out too well with the ferro rod. I couldn't get this to light. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep stretching this bad boy out. And we're actually going to put a little bit of bits in there. And we're going to use a storm-proof lighter instead to light this fire. Another thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get some air underneath this thing because I'm having a hard time with the moisture. And I'm also going to position it this way. Again, trying to get that kind of TP look going on, so it collapses down and makes a little bit of coal for me to use. So again, see how well this works. We're going to go ahead and grab these stormproof matches. And again, I'm going to try and sneak underneath that fire starter and get flame up there. So the right way to do this is with two, and you should be able to do it with two. In case one flames out on you, you can immediately go in with the second one. Okay, so we keep this one handy and see if I can get this to start. Okay, try not to breathe those fumes in there. I'm actually going to try and set this right there. Now you can see that storm match is just going to work. The hope is that it'll catch, and it did. All right, that single storm match did the work. That's why these things are awesome. They just hold a really good burn. But boy, try not to inhale those fumes, okay? Let me tell you, not the best smelling stuff on earth. But you can clearly see how this fire is well lit. I'm going to back up a little bit just for safety reasons here. And lift you up. But you can see how this is easily built up into a much better fire. Okay. Now I'm going to show you just how easy it is to start with the lighter. Okay, with the butane torch lighter. Okay, again, we have storms on approach right now. I just doused the heck out of this. So let's say worst case situation, you only have this for dry. Okay, that's fine, no problem. Say you misplaced your fire pit and tree just dumped a bunch of water on your stuff. You may want to move your fire pit if that happens, but let's just say some weird stuff happens, because that's how it is in life. Weird stuff does in fact happen. We're going to just put the dry stuff underneath there. And then we're going to add a little bit more wood. Hopefully dry up top, if not, whatever we can to get that flame going up a little bit more. Okay. Now, again, small cooking fire. We're not going to do all that. It's just for demonstration purposes today. So I'll pull out this guy here, and I'm going to actually crank this all the way up just for safety and in time. Okay. What I want to do is I want to aim it right towards that dry stuff. I'm just going to keep it there until I get a decent flame coming from the fire itself, not from the lighter. So once I see that decent flame, I'm going to back off. And yes, it is that easy. Okay. The storm match placement is everything on storm match. Along with this, you can easily burn out your entire lighter just not placing in the right spot. But if you have something to catch and you can accelerate that, oh, you can see it already went out on me. No problem. I have some embers I can now accelerate with the lighter. That's what makes the lighter so useful in these wet conditions. So now I'm just going to keep it longer until I have a decent flame. One that's going to make me proud, if you will. All right, and then hopefully that will sustain itself. And if not, again, I'll just keep trying to keep the heat in there until the heat is just so intense that it takes over the wetness of the wood and it starts to offset that damp condition that you're working in, which you're now seeing. Okay, so easiest, and ferro rod is the toughest without a fire starter. I will say that. If you don't have a proper fire starter, this ferro rod is going to be tough. Now for an example of a fire build in the rain. You can see we have completely wet conditions. The wood is completely soaked through. How do we get this lit? So if you're wondering what the secret is, again, that packing paper or cardboard paper. Now, I had this in my jacket to keep it nice and dry, and it's already getting damp just from the humidity in the air, which is crazy if you think about it. But I'm going to go ahead and place that nice tinder on top of our fire starter. And we're going to make kind of like a A-shaped formation with the kindling here, like such. And my goal here is to just try to get anything to catch. Quite honestly, I don't care what, as long as it's wood. So again, I got my ferro rod here. It's prepped. I'm gonna bear down a little bit, see if I can get this fire to light. Okay, I got a little bit of flame going. Let's see if it'll actually keep up though. Again, this is in completely wet conditions, so do not be surprised if this just completely burns out. But I feel like I've given myself the best chance I can, at least for a ferro rod situation. Even if I have a lighter on me, which I do, I'm not going to go to that right away. I want to save that butane for an absolute emergency situation. I want to go to this first. You can see it is struggling to keep going because of how wet the wood is, and it's exactly what I wanted to demonstrate here. It's just how difficult it can be to light in actual wet conditions. And it's not pouring on me right now, which it might be soon. But you can see that flame is just struggling to get up and out. But we are getting a little bit of flame on the wood, so we'll see. I'm gonna give it a little bit more time. I think the heat's finally starting to get to the tinder, which it is. So far so good. Looks like we're getting a good light. You can see how ferro rod can be beneficial in these wet conditions, because it's really easy to burn through your butane in your lighter trying to light this up with that. Storm-proof matches are also going to have a hard time because they just don't produce enough time in the flame. Now, starting in the rain is a whole different task altogether, and something that I would very much recommend you have a lighter like this for, because quite frankly, lighters like this just are kind of life-saving in that type of situation. They allow you to apply the heat exactly where you want it, quite a bit of it, in a very short amount of time. If you enjoyed all the ways we started fires today, please hit the like, make a comment about different ways that you want to start a fire, or maybe that, you know, for survival reasons. Don't be getting weird in the comments, all right? Or do, I don't care. But point being is, maybe comment below on different things you may wonder if it is or isn't a good fire starter, and I'll do my best to answer. Run around in your noggin like, hey man, what are some situations I might have to, like, on the fly start a fire? And again, glad we timed that right, because I don't know if you can tell behind me, but the weather is coming in. The canopy's doing a great job keeping it off of me right now, but thankfully we got this nice little fire right over here already going, so I don't have to worry about anything as far as, building a fire directly into the rain. Again, if you are, please make sure you have something like this. If you don't, if you are going to go the ferro rod method or the the storm match method, as we saw was also very effective, make sure you have fire starter and dry material to start with before you try to start fire in these conditions. As you can see, and you saw earlier, this thing is still building up, and if it was dry conditions, we'd have a roaring fire right now. So you can see the time difference is considerable, and you want to take that into account when you're making your survival fires, your cooking fires. You want to make sure that you're not wasting time and energy just doing basic stuff like starting a fire. Okay, as we continue in the survival course, you're going to get shelter building like you see behind me. You're going to get all sorts of nuggets and information on affordable and easy ways to stay alive and thrive in the wild and in any environment, including urban environments. So we will cover starting fires safely in that environment as well once we get into the channel a little bit more. If you have any questions on anything, feel free to comment below. Subscribe if you want to see and know when our next episode is coming out. Thank you for watching, bearing with us this far. Stay alert, stay alive.